Going on, my friends? This is Rick, and you're seated at the table, and we're going to talk a little bit about Comstar because I recently was watching a podcast last night, and a person who's really doing a lot of work on his channel to develop and establish himself as a Battletech podcaster and actually make a living doing it. I mean, my hat's off to him. That's a lot. He's had an opportunity in his life to allow him to take a moment to try to do this, and he's putting a whole lot of work into that channel. And I will try to put a link below because I think it's worth at least your time. If you're a Battletech enthusiast and you've not seen Red's channel, you really should. And of course, that's assuming I remember to put the tag down there because I can say it and not remember it. Anyway, remind me if I don't. Comstar is officially dead. As of 3150-ish, Comstar and then the dissolved word break basically has been eradicated, and pretty much all forms officially of word break. So according to the Catalyst people, this is third-party knowledge, by the way. I do not talk to Catalyst. I have never had a Catalyst person approach me that I know of, and they would have to vindicate or verify themselves very thoroughly for me to buy into them, because anybody can claim to be anything. So anyway, he's told them, this individual told Red after Red did his video on the introduction of Comstar, that there is no more Comstar, that Comstar is a dead horse, and that they have no intentions of bringing it back, which is sad because they just put out a series of novels that imply that there's some quite a bit of red herrings in the book that shouldn't be there. And I think that's I agree with Red that it was a very poor idea on part of Catalyst. That's a bad business model to pursue. Just saying, folks, you just don't do that sort of thing. You're just not doing yourself any favors. That's clicking sounds in my dice bag because I did a little bit of stuff. And the thing is, if you going to put out any kind of printed material that implies a faction that was actually fairly popular to a lot of players, either as a bad guy or as a playable faction, to get rid of it and say it, then put a herring in there implying that maybe it's not 100% dead, it's a bad thing. See, I first thought maybe, that's one way of companies can go about testing the water, so to speak. Let's throw out a hint at something and see whether or not the player base is perceptive or agreeable to it. I mean, it's the possibility that we may explore down the road. So once again, I'm not a big fan of absolutes. Absolute zero is absolute until it ain't. I'm sorry, but every time science and mathematics and whatever tries to prove something is absolute, it turns out that there's something else that says it's not, or some kind of caveat. So who knows? 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, who knows what they will do with Comstar if never doing anything with Comstar is on the play. I'm fine with that. Factions die. Keep them dead. Ain't because we ain't got enough of we have plenty of others out there, and several that would be worthy of being eliminated completely, but that's neither here nor there. So when I looked at Comstar, and I thought, this is one of those subjects and material that I really kind of had some fun with, and I like talking about, and I like the concepts. I don't like a lot of what they pulled and a lot of what they did and their politics and their the pseudo religious order mindset that they foisted on both their own people and on the inner sphere in general. I sure didn't like the way that fell apart and how it went south at the end. I think things really got muddled and confused from the game designer perspective. They kind of screwed up toward the end there, but of the clan war era. We're talking when FASA gave up the ghost and FanPro took over, and WizKids muddled with stuff and things like that. I mean, it's just what it is. We can't go back and fix that. We just have to go forward and accept what it is and or what may or may not have been. So I look at the what ifs. What if Comstar had done things different? I mean, Jerome Blake's belief that Comstar as an entity needed to evolve in such a manner to give it some kind of lasting effect, but also to make it stand apart from the current system that ruled the inner sphere, the current nobility system, the current corporate system. The corporate systems, and some of them are quite powerful entities, but they're still potentially corruptible in the aspect that they can be consumed, subsumed, can be acquired, can be sold, etc. So Jerome and Conrad concocts this deal to basically turn it into the neo-religious order that most people understood Comstar as at the beginning of the 3025 era and the beginning of Battletech, and quite up until even the modern standards. We know that Comstar was a farce. That as a religious order, it was a farce. Yet a lot of people within that farce really really drank the Kool-Aid. They really believed the dogma, and that caused issues. Hence the word of Blake and various sub-splinter groups and so on and so forth. So what did Comstar initially do? I mean, first off, they gained a basic neutrality. They made everybody, all the major house lords and minor house lords, accept the fact that they were involved. Do not screw with Comstar. Do not attack Comstar. Do not screw with Comstar stuff. If you do that, then we will remain neutral to anything and everything you do. We know that that too was a farce, that they quite often rigged things. They used their knowledge, the access of all that interstellar communications that gave them to manipulate the political scene, to inspire things and people and factions to do things that was detrimental in many ways to the people that they were, meddling with, and beneficial to Comstar in some means. There was, after the third generation of premises, that begins to develop this mindset that the Innersphere needs to crumble. It needs to fall on its back, and that way Comstar can come in, take over, and become basically the reborn Star League. So they developed this philosophy, or this madness, that only Comstar can save humanity. Humanity is doomed forever if it doesn't accept Comstar as its rightful rulers, or some BS. It's no different than most every house lord system out there. I mean, in a lot of politicians and political systems, even issues today, it's our party's way or no way. If you can't do it our way, it's wrong. I mean, the absolutes, once again, just seem to be in charge of everything. So in the beginning, they start out, and then they create this the Comstar credit, or the C bill, which then puts a fixed, valuable commodity across the inner sphere and the near periphery that's always going to be guaranteed. So house currencies value vary from house to house, and so making trade and business between houses, between independent organizations, etc., has its pitfalls. It's like that in the modern day today. Most currencies of the world value varies from country to country, and in some places extremely radically. So to have a single currency that's worldwide, that's accepted, that's the base for all of the currencies. This is what Comstar's C-bill represented. This gives them quite a additional tool in their toolbox, in addition to controlling the communications network. And then, of course, later down the road, at behest of the Caridans, they established the Mercenary Bonding and Review Commission, which puts a kind of a universal template on the top of the mercenary commands of the inner sphere to create this, or to give this another sense of stability and guarantee that things are going to be held to accountable. But this goes both ways, and many house lords over the centuries have learned that to their detriment. That you can't, you treat your mercenaries as the contract stipulates, or you can be punished or fined or feed or whatever, and the Comstar system of ratings is going to affect how good of for future mercenaries you're going to be able to acquire. I mean, it is what it is. So there was a number of other entity things that Comstar did that went under the radar. It wasn't something that really made it into lore, except hit or miss, and or wasn't discussed on any kind of table. The one of those being is, and forgive me if I forget the acronym for it, but basically Comstar is watching the interstellar trade routes and location of all the viable planets and so on and so forth. So they create the hyperspace chart system that pretty much everybody uses. And because these charts are updated via hyperspace or HPG networks and Comstar command or control networks or nodes, then everybody's getting the same astrogation charts. And given time, over the centuries, houses are, entire solar systems disappear. New ones are mislabeled and or regulated to being backwater. And this allows Comstar some pretty potent control over where commerce operates and where commerce goes and what the houses do and don't do. Entire systems disappear. Some of these were because of the destruction caused by the various succession wars. The planet ceased as a colony, as a colonized system, ceased to exist. Others died off and probably were forced, and then probably died off because they were cut off, and in part because later generations of Comstar. Thank you, Comstar. You had our backs. You looked out for everybody because that's what you do. So I asked myself, what more could Comstar have accomplished? What more could Comstar had done to make itself even more powerful, and the various house factions, the house lords, the other factions in the inner sphere prior to the arrival of the clans? Everything, the clans' arrival throws a wrench into everything, and everything changes extremely dramatically with the arrival of the clans. And in a way, that's one reason why there is actually quite a few people who are not fans of the clan era at all, because when the clans show up, the changes that are made are grossly detrimental to everything that we know as Battletech, as we enjoy it. So when we look at the things like what could have been, what would have been, what should have been, the clans really threw a wrench, really shook up Battletech as a whole. And I find I've always had misgivings from some angles, and acceptance in others. I mean, I really enjoyed a lot of the different stuff that the clan era brings to the table, but at the same time, I always wondered what would have happened. How different would the lore and the game dynamics be if the clans never occurred? Right, if we just continued on with the succession war, the very stuff that led up to the FedCom war and the Civil War, and I mean the list just goes on and on. The War of 3039, all this stuff. So the fact was, there was gobs and gobs and gobs of stuff going on that wasn't necessary to bring in this third massive outside force. And of course, doing so allowed them to throw Comstar back into the fray, with being another massively powerful military faction that the inner sphere had been secretly been waiting in the wings for just this moment. When the truth was, this very faction, this Comstar Grand Army, could have come out at any time during any of the succession wars, especially after the third succession war and after the quote fourth succession war and the various wars of territory and political instability that occur. So we could have had an entire different era of stuff before the clans showed up, instead of the clans showing up, or never seen the clans at all. But the game would not be what the game is now. The game is what it is, in part because of where it came from and what happened and what came from before. And that too is a fact. You don't like that? You know what? You don't gotta like it. You don't gotta like it. So when I look at that sort of thing and I say, well, what could have been different? What more could Comstar have done? I got to jotting some stuff down. So what if they had dominated the jump ship production? The fact that of all the great houses combined, the periphery of the great houses, excluding the clans, and in fact is nowhere in the clan lore in history books do they go into any great explanation of clan jump ship warship production capacity. We know they have it, but there's some misconceptions that in the main game as we know it, that there is a pile of warship production out there. That wasn't true. Majority of the war fleets that the clans utilized then, and some aspects still do in the modern 3150 era, were actually Starfleet ships that went with them on the Exodus. They just had that many warships and jump ships that went with them. They were able to mothball quite a few of those, and they reactivated them, and they've maintained them. But a lot of those warships are the same warships that were produced 500 years earlier or 400 years earlier, and so that they do have some capacity that's not disputed, but not massive. And we never see anything in the naval combat era throughout after the 3050, after the plan of invasion into the modern era. I have not yet heard of this conflict of hundreds of warships engaging like they did in the first succession war, and to a smaller extent the second succession war. The production's just not there. Yes, there's this resurgence in warship production, and ironically, a little bit of jump ship production after the arrival of the clans, because the intersphere houses are forced to do this. They have to have some kind of parity, because at that point they have nothing to counter a clan warship, even if it's a 400-year-old naval ship from the Starleague. They got nothing like it. Comstar did, but we never get any hard numbers of just how many Comstar naval warships had been relegated and stayed behind, because I don't think very many did. And I know they do list a few, and we do know that most of the shipyards in the Terran system were damaged during the Amorous Civil War at some point in the conflict to retake Terra, and or by saboteurs from Amorous's people. But we don't know the exact extent of just how much that was. And then we also know from the lore and from the source books that quite a few of these lines are mothballed or decommissioned. We also know from story and lore that production of a warship isn't something that they could just crank out every couple months. And it can take a couple years to build a decent sized warship. And the bigger the warship, the more resources, material, manpower, time it takes. Once again, this is why they don't see this huge resurgence in this massive warship battles, because in truth, and this comes up, Battletech is not a game about naval combat. I mean, it's not a game about starships. You want that, go play Star Trek, go play Star Wars. There's a whole slew of game systems for that sort of thing. Now, we have the rules for it. We have some mechanics for it. We do have some source books for it, yes. So it's available, but it's never been the bread and butter. It's not even, technically more than like the salt shaker off on the side somewhere that maybe never ever gets used. It's just when they do. And I hear the occasional comment from other YouTube creators that, well, there's still hundreds of warships, the fleets of this, 3051. No, there's not. Dudettes, no, there's not. Like I said, I've got the 3145 field manual or whatever the hell it is in my work truck. I'm just coming to the end of it. I've been slowly reading my way through it, rereading my way through it, and every one of those houses, every one of the naval houses and the clan factions and stuff do not have very many warships. Between the entire group, maybe maybe a score or more, 20, 30 at the most, total. We're not counting the home clans, because who the hell knows what they got still back there. We don't care, because for all intents and purposes, they're off the table too. And I keep hearing that too. Well, what's the home clans doing? What are they going to do with something? Don't know. Probably don't care. I imagine Catalyst is not planning anything. Maybe some writer will come up with a story and they say, hey, I got this, and they'll go, okay, we'll throw that in there just because we can. We know that they're back there doing something, but there won't be another invasion. There won't be a repeat. There shouldn't be. I mean, really, that would be bad business too. We've had it. We've done it. Let's not do that again. Let's not see yet another kind of thing like that occur. No, we got too much of a mess now. We got enough chaos and confusion going on in the game world now let's try to smooth out some of that. And then we're still not, we're still not there because they're still introducing and yet more internal issues and yet more diversion and so on and so forth. You know, what their grand scheme of plan is, your guess is as good as theirs, because I think they have an idea. I think they have a working model to a limit, but then they're going to keep a lot of options open, and that's also kind of good business. You don't really want to nail yourself into something. So we talked about Comstar. Well, they pretty much made it clear to Red, and I buy into, I got no reason to not believe anything Red says. I think he's got more connections than he implies. He kind of plays it down, but he obviously he's approached by people from Catalyst, which is more than most of us can say. I would be hard pressed to keep mom about, oh, somebody from Catalyst, so and so. I can't tell you who because I don't want to, step on your toes. I've learned some lessons the hard way many, 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 many years ago, not to do things like that. That can really, you want to, you get that kind of level of internal, connection. You kind of want to protect it, right? So I can respect Red for him saying that. I just do. So once again, they could dominate the jump ship production. In the same process, they could have eliminated what little house production existed. Accidents happen. It was horrible how that drop ship veered and slammed into the Blah shipyards and blew the whole damn thing up. Who knew that behemoth was loaded with 1 million tons of explosive fuel? Shit happens. Just like they could have went around and eliminated quietly by hiring them, or quietly by literally eliminating the engineers and the small cadre of shipbuilding people you need. People building battle mechs are not building warships. They don't have the same tool set. They don't have the same skill set. They don't have the same knowledge. So there's only going to be so many designers out there who have the knowledge, the understanding, the mechanics. The other thing that we do know from lore, and it's a very tiny spot, but it comes out that when they do resurrect the warship construction phase in the inner sphere, that one of the crucial elements, the houses can produce everything but the micro jump core that the jump ships require. So apparently the jump cores for the FTL engines for warships are smaller and more advanced than the standard kilometer long, half a kilometer long unit that's used in most jump ships. Because once the jump ship technology matured to a certain point, they really didn't go any further than that. If you look at most of the jump ships that are in operation through any of the eras of Battletech, they're the same mechanics and same design and same concept as what the initial stuff when they first came up with them back prior to the Star League formation. So there's never been any desire or drive or need to keep advancing them, which I've always kind of found a bit, okay, sure. That's just the way the game works. That's part of the flavor of the game. But in reality, humanity wouldn't, you'd have to have a lot of massive setbacks to not continue trying to advance technology, because we're kind of hardwired to keep trying to figure out a better, easier, smarter, innovative way of doing something. So they could have basically taken control of jump ship production over a period of time, and then the inner sphere houses would be dependent on Comstar to provide the jump ships replacements that they need and the parts to keep the ones they got running, right? Wouldn't that have been a powerful thing for Comstar to have acquired? And in addition to that, then the Comstar could have capitalized on that from an economic perspective by having their many more freighters, jump ship traffic available for the houses. So as the houses the own ships that they have wear out and are destroyed or get lost, and they can't afford to, they can't build any more of their own, and Comstar is only doling out a handful every year because production is so precious. Well, then obviously somebody needs to step in and help with that. So now we can bring in Comstar freighters and Comstar naval element to Comstar, which then would open up another avenue of them having ability to keep an eye on what their various factions are doing, what they're shipping, what they're moving. Oh, so this house is moving these military forces to here and here. Well, we had to use 2 of our ships to do it. Just saying, right? Brings us to the next point. Comstar could have dominated the education systems of most of the houses, especially higher learning. Toward the end of the Third Succession War, we start to see a resurgence of high technology, like the Navalon Institute of Science and elements of other houses doing something similar to that. But prior to that, the early years of the Third Succession War and the end of the Second Succession War, especially the Second Succession War, saw a lot of devastation on the higher educational facilities across the Inner Sphere because they became viable targets. And so a lot of that was something that could have been played up, and Comstar could have stepped in the role of providing those neutral-based, neutral-minded, robe-wearing, religious fanatic-looking, schools at all levels of education across all the houses for a price. Missed opportunities, right? They could have dominated the healthcare of the Inner Sphere. Now, it's ironic that the Magistracy of Canopus is considered the top tier for medical knowledge and advancements in the Inner Sphere. Their education systems are right up there too, but it's that the fact is that they have some of the best medical education systems or medical education systems left in the Inner Sphere is ironic. Yeah, there are certain core areas within the great houses that do produce this stuff. Obviously, doctors and things like this do exist. Medical research does exist. Well, just saying that Comstar missed the boat on that opportunity too. With the knowledge base that they had from the fall of the Star League, they had the cutting edge, most of the material, the cutting edge. They recaptured Terra. They took Terra and all those core institutions that existed in some form or another. Yeah, we know from, once again, from the stories and from the source books and from lore that that Amorus's occupation devastates the hegemony in many facets, and not just militarily, economically speaking, but they decimated the education system and the healthcare system, and they took a lot of these very well, educated individuals, professors and master doctors and scientists, and put them on the front lines or shot them, right? But Comstar still had the means and ability to resurrect a lot of that, and they chose not to, or they chose to keep it in-house. We'll never know the exact level of healthcare system available to the Comstar, internally speaking, but it had to be pretty close to Star League era technology, if not in some cases the possibility for even further advancements, because for better part of all the succession wars, Terra remains inviolate. Nobody goes and does anything to it. Most of the houses are not welcome there. There's not a lot of non-Comstar traffic coming in and out of the Sol system. I mean, a little bit comes in and out, but for the most part, of all the planets of the Inner Sphere, all the key capital planets in the Inner Sphere, the only one that doesn't see any kind of conflict for most of the succession wars is Terra. Things change, of course, and that's the way it goes, but they could have dominated the healthcare system. So that brings us to exploration. We see towards the end of the Fourth Succession War, Comstar starts to research. The Explorer Corps and things like this starts to gain some traction, especially after the arrival of the clans, because then it becomes very important to find where the hell the clans are based out of. Obviously, they didn't exist in another dimension. They had to be out there somewhere, and it's just a matter of time if somebody found them. And so Comstar had the resources and on a limited basis, and they had some assistance from the Draconis Combine on a limited basis to expedite exploration. But in reality is they always had the means, they always had the resources, and they could have produced more resources. They could have chose to become an active exploration faction. They could have had an exploration arm that would have been very conducive to Comstar itself. Comstar as a faction, as an entity in the Inner Sphere, is a very unique position, in part because it has inroads in pretty much every major and minor planet within the inner sphere via the HPD compounds and their networks and various institutions and things that they do. But as controlling turf, territory, resources, and industrial capacity, Comstar really doesn't have that much. When you compare what it does have compared to, the Commonwealth or the Federated Sons, I'm just saying, it's the same reason that when the clans invade the inner sphere, at the end of the day, the clans had no chance of survival. The only thing that saved their ass was Comstar in the Battle of Tukyat. Truth is, had that not taken place, given time, the inner sphere would have ground the damn clowns down, the clanners down, would have ground them down, would have destroyed them. They still might have been around in some element or another. The clan's own system screwed them. The way they attacked the inner sphere screwed them, and their ignorance, or their willful ignorance, really handicapped them. A handful of them got the picture first early on, and the fact that Comstar actually did the clans a huge favor and a very big disservice to the inner sphere. It's a running joke for me that I still just, most people don't see it, and I'm like, you got to be on that page to really understand. Just, we wouldn't have the clan problems we do in 3150. The 3150 era had Comstar not gotten involved with and tried to defend, or if they'd got involved in a different manner, perhaps they'd have stepped up and went shoulder to shoulder with the Commonwealth and the Combine and Razahog, took on the clans head on, and not this proxy battle for Terra crap that they allowed to take place, and this buying them 15 years of chance to get their shit together and to figure out, oh crap, well, all this didn't work. What do we do now? And how do we build up an industrial base and a resource base to because we can't get it from home. And then the home clan shut the door on them. So, is the way it goes. So exploration and expansion in that aspect, there was a missed boat. Comstar could have had far more than a handful of hidden worlds. They could have had hundreds. They could have had entire regions of the periphery out there that they were exploiting while the inner sphere was ignorant of it. I mean, entire stories and novels and could have been written about that Candlestein War and secrecy and all this other crap that was what never was, never will be. So it brings me to they could have dominated the research and development side of the inner sphere. For a long time, that was their main goal, was to hoard as much research as they could and to internalize development for them specifically, and to deny it to the House Lords and the various factions in the inner sphere. And they were quite successful at this. They were very good at it. It wasn't until, once again, the era of the Force Succession, where Hans Davion, NASA, and the NASA's and other, entities of that nature start to get traction, and then even then they tried to eliminate them, and they failed at it, which is, even a stop clock kind of thing. It's going to happen. So in truth, they could have got ahead of that. They could have been behind the innovation and research and development and controlled it from a different angle. They could have limited this to the inner sphere by quietly eliminating rival research and science development organizations and teams, and bought out private groups and hired the best and from the houses, etc., and put them to work for themselves. Ship them off to some of these secret worlds somewhere in the periphery that the inner sphere didn't know about, just to get rid of them and become dominant in research and development. So they were at the head of everything that came out, but they chose to not go down that route. This could have been extended to mechs and weapon systems and you name it, right? So that brings me to my last possible thing that they could have, should have, would have, but didn't, and it would be to dominate the mercenary field. And you say, well, that's not sort of, well, they had the mercenary, that's not the sort of thing they're going to do. They have the mercenary bonding commission, things like that, right? Okay, yeah. So they could have done that. Did what they did. No, reality is they had the means and the resources to have created a number of merc commands pseudo mercenary commands who are actually training grounds for the comm guards to give them real battlefield experience and to expand their influences throughout the various houses, and to at critical times remove those much needed resources of man and material from those very houses. You know, if you look at most of the conflicts, War of 3039, the Fourth Succession War, a lot of the internal derision, if it wasn't for the fact that they could hire mercenaries in large numbers, a lot of these houses wouldn't have been able to pursue what they did, at least not to the degree that they did. And of course, we know that Comstar wanted that sort of thing. They wanted the houses beating each other senseless. They wanted them to beat themselves into the Stone Age. Well, they could have been more proactive in that aspect if they had dominated the mercenary market much more than they did. They had an opportunity there and didn't make use of it, didn't exploit it. Or if they did it in a very limited fashion. So, I mean, you know, the truth of it, it's always the truth about what and where something can be added to something, and we don't know how and why and where, you know, it's going to go. And yeah, I'm trying to add something here I should have had already put on at the end of the. So I'm going to attach something to the end of my channel here, and I hope you guys will stick around long enough to take a look at it and see it, because I don't know, I just want to share. One of those things where I want to share, and I want to put it out there. It's like I said, one of those things where it just frustrates me. So, you know, I thought we're going to put that out there, right? Because I'm coming into the channel. And anyway, until next time, this is Rick. You guys have a great channel. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in the gaming industry or gaming fandom that says, hey, this is a channel worth checking out, right? Till next time, I hope you guys stick around, because this isn't it button going. Here, let's get so this is cycle 1. And first thing I did was I went and I searched. Our colony ship drops out on the very edge of known Imperium space and is left to fend for itself. And we were in an uncharted sector and the center of this particular quadrant. And so what I did is I did an exploration roll, and I discovered that there is a class G43 sun, and it has a grassland orbiting that planet. And this allowed my little fleet to be deployed. So my colony ship is now in orbit around this grassland of a planet. And I went and I explored 40% of the planet, in addition to finding out what the mineral resources were for the planet. And so I know that the planet is grassland, it's breathable, it has a 1.5 build modifier. I know what its population growth modifier is. It also has a single moon that is a frozen rock. It's non-breathable. It has a 7.5 breathable build modifier. I know that the planet has oxygen, water, and 5 mineral resources in large enough quantities to be considered a mega find. Pretty much every planet has trace elements of most mineral resources, but those are much harder to exploit. So I have used up a fuel point and a supply point for all of my my ships. Now my colony ship came in, generally speaking, it has 6 cycles worth of movement available to it. 6 cycles of movement and supplies. After cycle 6, beginning at cycle 7, my population, my colonists begin to suffer. They start to die, and I lose a percentage each round or each cycle after that, and it increases to the point where it will completely dissolve. The whole colonial effort can fail. And so we had a luxury here because we were able to find a planet right off the bat, and we know that's a breathable planet with a very decent build modifier. You don't get much better than 1.5. The best would have been a standard or an Earth type, a Terra type planet, but they're rare. So I choose to do 4 exploration rolls in cycle 1, and on my first roll I had a wildlife encounter. On my second roll, a gargantuan fauna encounter. On the third roll, I found an abandoned mining facility that's 83% damaged, and on the fourth roll, I found an exotic location that could be exploited as a tourist trap. So this means I already know 40% of my planet, what the planet has. So I would say the planet is 40% explored, and it is now Current cycle is now cycle 2. And so I could choose now to explore more of the solar system, because I only know 10% of the solar system. So there's 90% more of the system. There could be more planets, more moons, and asteroid fields. What I do know for sure, there's no interstellar hazards, no stellar hazards, no black holes, no you know, nebula, nothing like this that's going to cause a problem. And we found that by finding, when we located, that this particular system has a breathable planet in it, so we know it's good. And that means I could just choose on cycle 1 to have immediately colonize the planet, and I chose not to do that. And so in order to, because I now have 5 more cycles worth of options available for exploration and development of this particular system and the planet, I felt that, you know, perhaps this is what I want to do, because there's always the possibility of getting a negative roll that can be detrimental. You can get to the 10th, the 100th percent of the exploration phase and discover there's something horrific on the planet that's going to cause a problem, and you might be forced to relocate at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and take a gamble, and I'm going to take my drop shuttle, and I'm going to use another point of food, another point of fuel, and make an exploration roll. And once again, like I said, this would be 50% of the grassland, which I have yet to name. And I'm going to see which chart I have 3 exploration charts for planets. So I'm going to see which one I'm going to roll. And it's 89, which would be chart 3, which is what I've got open at the moment. And we'll see, we are rolled a 3. So 3 unmarked Comsat orbits the planet. So we know at some point somebody else has been here, because there's a mining facility that was constructed then abandoned. And now we know that there is an unmarked Comsat in orbit. We don't know anything else. All right. So then I'm going to go and I'm going to opt to use my mining ship to do another search of the planet, which uses up another point of food. When we test food, oxygen, and water, it uses another ton. And then because it's a Tech 1 ship, it uses 3 Tech 1 engines, which means it uses 3 tons of fuel each cycle, each time it uses them. So I'm going to use another 3, which then brings us down a little bit more and allows us to roll 60% of the planetary surface. 58, and that would be chart 2, I believe. And chart 2, we're going to roll again for an 89 on chart 2. Roll on one of the other exploring planet charts. All right, so it'll be chart 1, even it'll be chart 3. So odd, or even is chart 3. So 90. What is it? 96. 96. Flora discovered. Yeah, it's a grassland planet. Expects to be a lot of stuff. Flora discovered. It says, if research, one of the following needs, if research, roll one of the following. So, if I research it, chart 3, number 96. Basically what that says is that it could be flame resistant, it can be energy resistant, it could have see-through properties, organic replacement for steel that can be harvested or grown, it could be used to make luxury grade beverages, or has natural camouflage properties. So there's a bunch of options here that potentially, so if when I get to the point where I'm able to do research, and that would be yet another video if we go there, and I can choose to do the research on it and to discover exactly what is interesting about this particular flora, and and to find a ways to exploit it. So this brings us to our 2 scout ships, and I'm going to go ahead and use them to explore the planet 2 more times, bringing it up to 80%. 80% explored, And so, chart number 3, that's a 90, and 11 on chart 3. Exotic flora discovered. Well, it is a grassland, so there is a lot of flora to possibilities, right? Once again, basically the same C. So C, developed worlds, designing flora and fauna chapters. So when we get the wildlife, things like this, there's a whole other set of chapters for us to explore these and to get more details on them to find out if they're a problem or not. Because in reality, this wildlife could be a massive man-eating tiger thing, or this exotic flora down here could be a massive man-eating flora thing. So I mean, there's still possibilities of there being problems down the road, even after we colonize the planet. Such is the dangers of colonization. So we're going to roll 51, bring us to 80% of the planet's surface being explored. Excuse me, 51, and that would be chart 2. So we will roll again to see what's on the chart. 44. And yet, flora discovered. More plants. And this one specifically says it's dangerous. Dangerous. So when we get to that point, when we actually go to explore and determine exactly what sort of wildlife and plants we have, this particular one will include the caveat that it is dangerous. So that brings us to the end of cycle number 2, and we are now at 80% of the planet's surface being explored. And that'll work until next time. I actually got it videotaped. Hope you guys tune in and see what happens in the next one. Until next time, you guys have